reaction from a Republican congressman from Texas, Will Hurd. Congressman, good to see you.
Good to see you, Chris. Thanks for having me on, man.
Good. And to repeat the record, you have said previously on this show and elsewhere that you know very well from your time at the CIA that this ambassador from Russia is someone who you wanted to see kicked out of the country when other diplomats and Russian operatives were removed by the Obama administration because of the meddling in the election. You still feel that way?
Absolutely. This is something that I was advocating back in October. I think kicking out the 31 intelligence officers is a good move as well. I had said that this should be a basic step, is kicking the ambassador out of the country. The closing down on the 2 locations in the U.S. used by Russian intelligence, and the Treasury sanctions on the GRU and the SVR, I think are good moves. Russians are they are our adversary. They are not our friend, and we need to be taking this activity into trying to manipulate our elections very seriously, and we need to be doing a review of this in a bipartisan, sober fashion.
Let's get into all of that, but first with the headline. What do you think of the Attorney General's decision to recuse himself?
I think the Attorney General recusing himself was the right move. You know, any sense of impropriety needs to be removed from this this review and this activity. And the acting deputy attorney general will be calling the shots, and is probably likely to tap one of the 92 U.S. attorneys to be involved in this. And of those 92 U.S. attorneys, they have been selected by many different presidents, and they're all sharp individuals that are committed to prosecuting the law.
If semblance of impropriety is the issue, why not go for a special prosecutor and then have it go from there?
Well, if you use one of the 92 U.S. attorneys that are already in, I think that is an independent voice. Are people calling for getting somebody out of retirement who hasn't been involved in the legal system for a while, or who hasn't been working with FBI and the intelligence agencies on how to develop a case and something like this? You need folks that are prepared, that understand the system, that are up to date on what's happening. And I think within Department of Justice, you have the folks that will do that, and these are men and women that have prosecuted some of the most serious cases across the country,
right,
and that are very political cases as well.
I hear you. The counterpoint is that they're still exposed to political vulnerability because of what their status of employment is. But I hear you about that, and we'll see if any of it happens. But now, putting on your CIA hat for a second and your experience with Intel, when you see that you now have a growing list of people who had meetings with the Russian ambassador or other officials, and now I think we're up to at least 5 people who are connected to the campaign who did it, are you concerned with the fact that this happened, or that there seems to be a desire to keep it quiet that this happened?
I think everybody who's had contact with the Russians need to get in a practice of oversharing. If you look at the Obama administration or the George W. Bush administration, how many people in those times had contact with Russians? Yes, the Russians are our adversary, but we are working with them in certain areas. So there's always going to be contact between government officials and Russia. I think the problem is we're making this a partisan activity, and we should be focused on how do we prevent and how do we fully understand what the Russians were trying to do to manipulate our elections. How do we respond to those types of things in the future? How do we work with our allies to make sure this kind of stuff doesn't happen in France and in Germany, in places like that?
Look, I know there's a political price for taking positions on this kind of stuff, but do you believe this is a witch hunt? Looking at all these people, I mean, that's what the president has called it, that's what some of his supporters are calling it. Or do you believe there are real questions here that go to the role of administration officials and any coordination or just simple contact with Russia during that period?
I think I have full faith and confidence in the FBI to pursue any counterintelligence and counterespionage cases properly inaccurately. I think a review of some of this contact is valid, but if there is no evidence, then we need to move on. That's one of the reasons why, if there are investigations, it should not be done out in public. You are looking at sensitive sources and methods. You may be looking into people that ultimately there is no fire, even if there possibly is a little bit of smoke. This is why we have to allow our law enforcement professionals to do their job, and then that's where members of Congress and the investigatory bodies in the House and the Senate should be making sure that the job was done properly.
What do you think is going to happen?
What I think is going to happen next is that the process is going to work, is that law enforcement is going to do their review. You're going to have Department of Justice make decisions on where to go next. I think the House and the Senate have already been involved in investigating the Russian attempts to impact our election and looking at what sources and methods they were using, how they were using cyber activity. Was the government response to these activities appropriate? How do we change to do that? So this is a serious matter, and we need to make sure we're doing this in a bipartisan and thorough way, because we've got to protect an institution that is so vital to our republic.
Will Hurd, always appreciate the candor. Look forward to talking to you about this more as we go forward. Have a good weekend, sir.